As millions of people increasingly worry what the future holds in store for themselves, their children, the human family as a whole, one man travels the globe assuring his lecture audiences that all will be well, that justice and reason will prevail. In the midst of today's chaos and strife, British artist and futurist Benjamin Creme speaks with total conviction, not about the inevitability of a troubled world, but about a brilliant new civilization in the making, inspired and guided by a group of highly evolved spiritual teachers who are now among us. At their head, says Creme, is the world teacher, Maitreya, who embodies the aspirations and expectations of all people, religious and non-religious alike.
Benjamin, who is Maitreya, and why do you refer to him as the world teacher?
Maitreya is the head and leader of that group of advanced individuals known as the Masters of Wisdom and the Lords of Compassion. He holds the office in that group of world teacher, and so he is the world teacher. And every age has a teacher, and Maitreya has, before this time, manifested himself through different individuals who were the teachers for a given time. He manifested himself through Krishna, through Shankaracharya, and 2,000 years ago through Jesus. From the baptism to the crucifixion, Jesus was overshadowed by the consciousness of Maitreya, who embodies what we call the Christ principle, the Christ consciousness. He is so advanced and so pure, he can actually embody in his own being divine principle, the principle of love, which is also the principle of consciousness and of evolution itself. So he is the Lord of love.
So his spiritual teachings aren't meant for any one group?
They're meant for everybody, for the whole of humanity. He does not come as a religious teacher, although all the religions expect him under one name or another. Christians await him as the Christ, expecting the return of Jesus Christ, through whom he acted 2,000 years ago. Buddhists await him under his name, foretold to come now by the previous Buddha, Gautama Buddha, who foretold that at this time would come into the world another Buddha, Buddha like himself, enormous stature, whose personal name would be Maitreya, and who would inspire and guide humanity into the creation of a brilliant golden civilization based, as he put it, on righteousness and truth. That is the task of Maitreya in this coming age. Jews await him as the Messiah, Hindus as Krishna, Muslims as the Imam Mahdi or the Messiah, depending on their particular sect. These are all names for one and the same individual, the head of our spiritual hierarchy.
Are his teachings also for people who aren't part of any organized religion?
Indeed, he has said, I have not come to found a new religion, I have not come to create followers, I have come to teach the art of self or God realization. He says, the self, with a capital S, the self alone matters. You are that self, an immortal being. He equates the self with God, with the divine. And he says our problems, our difficulties in life are due to the fact that we identify with everything other than the self. For example, he says, ask yourself, who am I? And you will find you're identifying either with this physical body as a self, which it is not, and therefore you suffer the infirmities and limitations of the physical body, or you identify with your feelings, your sensations, your energies, and think that is the self, which they are not. They are not no more immortal than the physical body. Or you identify with the constructions of your mind, and you take that to be the self. But that is only memory. That is only the creation of thought forms in the mental body. None of these are the self. He says the self stands behind all of that, reflects itself through the human soul at the soul level of existence, and that soul reflects itself once again on the physical plane as the man or woman in incarnation, with a physical body, emotional, sensation and feeling body, and a mental body. And these are the vehicles of the self. And the self, he says, simply observes. It doesn't act, it simply observes through the vehicles. But if you identify with the vehicles and take that to be yourself, then the self gets trapped in that vehicle. And hence the limitations in your physical life, your emotional life, or your mental life from this trapping of the self, which should be free to move in and out with total freedom of these vehicles.
Are there specific things we can do to lead to the realization of this self?
Maitreya says that the simplest path, his path, is to practice three things, three practices, which he says are very easy. Well, they sound easy, they're really very difficult, believe me, but they are the way to go. One is to practice honesty of mind. You know, he says almost everybody thinks one thing, says something else, and does something else again. There is no direct line from what we think to what we do. So he says you have to create harmony in yourself, you have to be honest in your thinking and to say what you think precisely. Second, sincerity of spirit. He says the best way to think about this is to think what we mean when we say we have a heart-to-heart talk. When you have a heart-to-heart talk, you're talking from the center of yourself, and the center of yourself is the self. And if you're true to that center of yourself, and don't try to imitate people, other people, however noble or gifted they might be, but be yourself, and don't try to influence other people or manipulate other people, but be true, sincere, heart to heart in everything you do, and also practice what he calls detachment. That is detachment not in the sense of standing apart from life, but from your identification with the physical body, with the feeling body, with the mental body. If you do what you do with detachment, then you will become aware of the self. And the more awareness you have of the self, the closer you get to self-realization, which it says is the goal of all life. That's what we have come into life for, to realize ourselves as the self, but on the physical plane, as well as being the self, behind all creation, to be that same divine being on the physical plane. And the proof that it can be done is the fact of the masters. Every single one of them is a self-realized being. And if they can do it, we can do it.
I was going to say, because when I normally think of detachment, I think of indifference or complacency, and that's not what you're talking about.
Nothing to do with either complacency or indifference, right? The contrary. Okay. It's like total difference, total involvement, total compassion, total absolute concern for and working within humanity, but at the same time standing back and doing what you do with detachment, with the total altruistic nature of the soul. The soul is totally altruistic. On the soul plane, there is no sense of separation of I. It doesn't occur to the soul. And it's to inculcate that altruistic, detached view and action in life which is wanted. So you don't identify with the physical body, which is corruptible, lasts just so long and dies, with the feeling body, which likewise is corruptible and lasts so long and dies, or with the creations of the mental body, which likewise lasts only as long as the physical body lasts. None of these are you. And it is that kind of detachment from that identification which is meant by Maitreya.
Going back to self-realization and becoming aware of the self, in a spirit, this is a spiritual sense, are there any prayers or anything like that would help us achieve that?
All prayers would help one achieve it. The Lord's Prayer, if used, would help one achieve it. But Maitreya has given to the world a new prayer, which is called the Prayer for the New Age, in which you identify yourself with the self. I am the creator of the universe, that which stands back of all creation. That is you, that is me, that is all people. Everybody is the creator of the universe. And so you get a growing sense of yourself, not as an omnipotent being, but as you truly are, as a spiritual essence at the root of everything that you are. Maitreya says, you know, sometimes you get a feeling that there's something or someone standing behind you, around you, above you, all around you. That is the self. This happens when you are alone. Most people are afraid to be alone. They get lonely. But he says, in fact, that state of loneliness is a marvelous state in which to sense the self, because we hide it from ourselves. We rush for entertainment. We turn on the radio, the television. We meet friends. We do anything other than sit quietly alone, experiencing ourselves as the self. And yet it says everybody needs this. They need this space around them in which they cannot be got at. They can't be asked to do things. They can't be forced to do this or do that for other people or for themselves or for anybody else. But given that space in which the self, you can become aware of the self in a very powerful way. And this growing awareness makes you able to tap into the self just like that at a moment. So you say the New World Prayer, you practice detachment, honesty of mind and sincerity of spirit, and in a very few lives you create the conditions in which self-awareness grows into self-realization.
Since Maitreya isn't appearing on television or writing books, how has he communicated his teachings?
Well, through me, he gave 140 messages at my regular lectures in London about his coming, in which fragments of those teachings are given. But very specifically, he gave a body of teachings through to one of his close associates in the Asian community of London where he lives and has been living since July 1977. These teachings given to his associate he was asked to pass on through to two journalists, independent journalists, and they were asked to pass it on to me for the dissemination through our magazine Share International, and we also sent a large number of the forecasts which he made, the political and economic and so on, forecasts to the world's media. And over a period of about 3.5 years, from 1988 to about June 1988 onwards, he gave a huge number of predictions of world events, which one after another in the most uncanny way have taken place. We're now waiting for the stock exchange crash, which is one of the big ones not yet finalized. And in this way, the teachings, as we know, or at least the preliminary phase of the teachings of Maitreya, have been given.
Now, Maitreya says in one of those messages, let your awareness grow. Awareness is the light of life. In a nutshell, what does that mean?
The whole of life depends on awareness. In fact, what we take to be ourselves, this physical body, this mechanism of sensation, this mental body which is churning out ideas or taking in ideas, whichever, or both, is really an instrument. It's an instrument of growing awareness of the nature of reality. And but for that, we would never know the purpose of life, we would never evolve, we would never reach any kind of potential. Now, we have the potential of all creation at our fingertips if we evolve an instrument of awareness by which means we could come into contact with it. So it is like antenna. Awareness is the antenna by which we sense out the nature of God, which is the nature of reality. The nature of all creation is open to us through what we call awareness. That is the light which carries us forward in evolution.
Okay. You know, in my own experience, the biggest thing that keeps me from realizing my full potential in many ways, I suppose, is fear. And I've only come to understand that recently. It seems to me, for a lot of us, I think, fear is what really holds us back and causes a lot of misery. Do Maitreya's teachings address this issue of fear and how to overcome it?
Yes, well, the whole process of detachment is to do with a growing detachment from fear. Fear is the corroding glamour, as the masters call it, the illusion. Fear is the result of a complete illusion about the nature of reality. We think we are separate. We are not. There is no such thing as separation. That's the major heresy from which all fears come. We feel we're going to be alone, we feel we're not going to be loved, we feel we're not going to get what we need, and so on. Yet life, that's us, what we call God, which is also in us, provides everything that everybody needs. And when they need it, when they become aware of the need, and when they can work creatively towards that need. And so everything is there. There is no need to be afraid. Animals are not afraid. The fear is the result of thought. As soon as you can think, you can become afraid. Animals don't think. They have an instinctual reaction to life. They run away. An antelope will run away from a leopard or a lion, not because it's afraid, because it doesn't want to be the lion's dinner. It knows if it doesn't run, it'll be its dinner. It doesn't think, oh my goodness, you know. If you're afraid, then you inhibit the adrenaline which makes you run. The lion causes the antelope to run, but not from fear, but through the adrenaline which courses through it and puts speed on its limbs. But we normally, if we're afraid, we become inhibited. We cannot run. We cannot do what we need to do to escape from whatever danger. And you're really talking about psychological fear. And psychological fear can only be addressed from a growing sense of detachment. You have to realize that there is no need to be afraid. You can ask yourself, who am I? Who am I? And you will find you are the fear if you identify with the fear. But if you don't identify with the fear, you're not afraid. So you have to learn this growing detachment from your physical body, from the emotional, feelings, sensational body, where this real fear starts, and where, from the mental body, where it becomes a thought form, where you can control your reactions. You do so by a growing detachment. So the thing to get over fear is to become detached from the need to fear. You must become totally fearless if you are going to truly live.
That sounds like a slow process.
Oh, of course. It happens life after life after life. This is what the process of incarnation and reincarnation provides. Through the law of cause and effect, in relation to the law of rebirth, we come into life again and again to gradually cut down on all these unnecessary emotional identifications, the wrong identifications with life, with our body, with our feelings, with the creations of our mind. The baby coming into life comes in pure. It has a total sense of itself as the self. Unfortunately, it doesn't have the mechanism of speech to tell you all about it. But the baby, the young especially, up to a few months old, the baby is just totally saturated with its enjoyment, its pure joy, when it's not hungry, that is, its pure joy of being the self which it feels itself to be. Then we make it aware of itself as this physical body, and we talk to it and we give it a name and so on. I didn't give my first child, a name for about a year. I only called him the boy. And for at least a year, he called himself the boy. When he began to speak and so on, he said, the boy wants this, and the boy. And that was a very detached way of approaching him. If I'd called him a name, he would have identified with the name and therefore with the personality. I don't know if it helped, but I just remember that that's what I did. Yeah.
In another message, Maitreya says, I do not want you to believe in me. First experience me within you. Would you explain that?
Yes. Religious groups believe that if you have a teacher, Jesus or Krishna or Buddha or whomever, you have to believe in them. And Christian would say, believe in Jesus and all will be well. Just believe in him. Say you believe, but what does it mean? Just to believe, just to say, I believe that Jesus exists. Well, personally, I believe that Jesus exists. He's living in Rome. He's been living in Rome for the last 7 years. He's a great master. And he will be seen very shortly in the world with Maitreya and a whole group of other masters. But just to say, I believe in Jesus doesn't change one. What really changes one is to identify with that which Maitreya as the Christ, Jesus who stood in for him in Palestine, demonstrate in themselves. That is the love which is the Christ principle. You identify with that in you, in your own self, and you have the experience of Maitreya. Just to believe in him as a world teacher is not important. And it's not important whether you believe in Jesus or Maitreya. But it is important that you recognize the Christ principle in yourself, and insofar as that is awakened in you, Maitreya can work through you. He can change the world through you.
And that's how we experience him within us.
Indeed, within ourselves as an experience of the Christ principle. He embodies that principle. Now, from his point of view, there's no separation between him and us. He says, I am with you and in you. I am with you physically, present in the world, living in London, but I am in you as the Christ principle in your heart, which is this heart at the right-hand side of the body. The spiritual heart is at the right side of the body. In the Bible it says, the wise man's heart is at the right side, the foolish man's heart is at the left. This refers to the spiritual heart in which the Christ principle is awakened and which is done through the agency of the Christ. And then it can be blown on by the masters and by the Christ and blossom as a manifest Christ principle in the individual.
Many of these ideas that you put forward today may appeal to people who are spiritual seekers but who don't want to be part of any organized religion. Is it possible to follow Maitreya's teachings without following him as an individual?
I think that's exactly what has to be done. He says, I have not come to found a religion, I've not come to create followers. In fact, if you follow me in the sense of chasing after me, claiming me, putting me in your pocket, then you will lose me. He wishes you to follow the teachings, put into practice the teachings, because if you don't put in practice the teachings, it matters not whether you believe in him or not. Just to believe in a religious teacher does not change you. To put into practice what the religious teacher of all groups, of all nations, of all religions are teaching changes the man or woman who does so. But you have to do it in yourself. Nobody can save you. You have to save yourself.
So his teachings would apply to those who don't want to follow any organized religion. I guess what you're saying would also apply to those who do belong to a religious organization.
He says those who are already in religious groups and so on should continue to evolve within their own tradition, whatever it is. He says, I don't want you to worship me. He said, if you worship me, you're putting me above you. I'm not above you. I'm exactly on the same level as everybody, because there is only one divinity. The only difference between the Christ and ourselves, Maitreya and ourselves, or any of the masters and ourselves, is that they have achieved, demonstrated the divinity, whereas most of us are at some stage way down there in demonstrating that divinity. But one day we shall do what they can do. Jesus said it in Palestine, you know. One day you will do greater things than I do because I go to the Father. He knew that he would evolve, and he knew that there's a path of evolution open to everybody, and that one day everybody finds themselves on that path. That esoteric path is the path at the last stage of the evolutionary process, the path of discipleship, eventually the path of initiation, in which the masters, in a very direct, straightforward way, guide their disciples to the same achievement, stage by stage, which they have done.
Then it sounds like Maitreya's teachings don't go contrary to any
not at all.
Organized religion.
No, the point is that the teachings of the hierarchy are the teachings behind all of the religious teachings, all of the philosophical teachings, all the culture, all the science, all the art that's created in the world of the best, the highest level, is done under the inspiration of the masters. They are the muses for the poets and the writers and the artists down the ages. They impress the minds of their disciples. Sometimes they're in quite close relationship and overshadow those disciples. The music of Mozart or of Bach and Beethoven would not be what it was without the overshadowing mind of the masters working through them. It's likewise for the great painters. Columbus would never have found what he thought was America, or he actually thought it was India, right, but for the inspiration of the master who stood behind him.
If we were able to put all these teachings, actually able to put them into practice, how would they affect our day-to-day lives?
Oh, they would transform it. If you put into practice the process of detachment, then you become detached. Things don't get to you in the same way. You stand back a bit from life and look at it, and you're not totally taken up when things are good, nor are you terribly depressed when things are bad. You become more equable and easier of accommodation and become more adaptable to life. Adaptability is a very positive aspect which shows in the animal kingdom and in the human kingdom when you become detached.
More balanced.
More balanced, more at ease with yourself and others around you, therefore.
Sounds like
easier
life
to
would
live
be
with.
Less stressful. Yeah.
Less stressful indeed, yeah. You see, it's very easy to get taken up by the feelings that this is, everything's against me. This is too much. I can take not an ounce more. All my disappointments, all my failures, all these terrible things that seem to happen to me and that cripple people. But if, much of it is their own doing. As you become detached, all of that takes, you see things in perspective. You have to have a sense of proportion in life.